sound like thunder cracking through stone shook the bones of every spectator as a brutal punch detonated across the cage. The moment lingered suspended in disbelief as the fighter crumpled to the mat, like a puppet with severed strings. Limbs slack, chest still. Time itself seemed to stagger in shock. The crowd gasped in one collective breath, an inhale so sharp it sliced through the roar of adrenaline. For one agonizing beat, the stadium forgot how to exhale. What happened next will shock you. Like and subscribe or share and comment if this story moved you. The referee dove forward, knees skidding across sweat-soaked canvas, eyes wide with panic. But the victor was already raising his fists, high swagger dripping from every sinew. His grin a jagged, merciless slash cut through the atmosphere like broken glass. He leaned over the fallen body and spat venom, his voice amplified not by the microphone, but by sheer arrogance. "Welcome to the real world," he sneered. The crowd erupted, but not in unity. Cheers battled against uneasy murmurs. Some fans chanted with rabid devotion, others shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether they'd witnessed sport or savagery. But in the front row, beneath the muted shadows of the VIP section, one man remained completely still. Johnny Depp. He didn't blink, didn't clap, didn't so much as twitch. Dressed in a black coat the color of night's final hour, he looked less like a spectator and more like an omen. His dark, quiet eyes, void of fear or admiration, locked on the fighter with the weight of judgment. And the fighter noticed. In the electric chaos of the arena, that single pool of calm became a storm's eye. The fighter, chest still heaving from adrenaline, grabbed the mic and turned. "You think you're tough, Johnny Depp? Huh?" He taunted, his voice dripping sweat and mockery. "You've played pirates, gangsters, outlaws. Let's see if you're more than just smoke and script. Step in here with me." A collective gasp rolled across the arena. Like an earthquake wave, fans jolted upright, others frozen in their seats, caught between awe and absurdity. A chant ignited, fueled by disbelief and growing momentum. "Johnny, Johnny, Johnny." He stood not with drama, not for applause, but with the slow elegance of a man who had walked through fires unseen. His coat shifted with his motion, like wind brushing over silk. A silver ring caught the light. No entourage, no chaos, just presence. He stepped toward the cage, and silence fell like a curtain before a divine act. No music, no microphone, just gravity and intention. The kind of moment that strips the air from lungs and leaves the world wondering what it's truly witnessing. Everyone knew something was about to change forever. The stadium thrummed with a voltage that wasn't just heard, it was felt. A vibration beneath the skin, a pulse behind the eyes. The cage in the center no longer resembled a stage for sport, but a temple of reckoning soaked in blood and expectation. Floodlights rained down like celestial judgment, casting long shadows that danced across the mat, still stained with bruised dreams. Every seat leaned forward, every breath held ransom, and through it all Johnny Depp walked toward the cage with a quiet that screamed. There was no hesitation in his stride, no fanfare, no trace of bravado, only a stillness, sacred, grounded, defiant. His coat, stitched from the fabric of midnight, caught glimmers of silver from the arena lights, as if the cosmos themselves had woven threads into it. He paused at the open gate of the cage, not in fear, but reverence. Then he stepped through. The gate swung shut behind him with a resounding clang. It was the sound of history sealing itself. Inside the cage, the young fighter bounced from foot to foot, his bravado thick and twitching. Sweat shimmered on his temple, not from fear yet, but from the kind of adrenaline that knows it's being watched by gods. His smirk widened like a cracked mirror. "Oh, he's really here," he sneered into the mic, the man of mascara and monologues. "You want to recite a poem, Johnny? Or do we finally see if you've got any punch behind that poetry?" The crowd laughed nervously, hungrily. But Johnny, he didn't. He walked to the center of the ring like it was a confessional booth. No theatrics, just a gaze, dark, still surgical. His eyes met the young man's with the kind of weight that could crush ego without raising a hand. It was a silence louder than thunder. The fighter blinked just once, a twitch, a tremble in the armor. He tried to laugh it off, spinning theatrically in the ring, arms wide. "Ladies and gentlemen, our special guest, Captain Jack Smackdown." But the crowd wasn't with him anymore. Something was shifting, slow, unseen, seismic. Johnny adjusted his stance with the grace of a master musician, tuning his last string. No raised fists, no flexed muscles, just one foot pivoting slightly, as if gravity itself had asked permission to move through him. The bell rang, the crowd erupted, and the young fighter exploded forward, a blur of fists and fury, a tidal wave of sweat, arrogance, and muscle memory. He jabbed, kicked, swung with a storm's hunger, a firestorm unleashed. But Johnny moved like mist. He didn't block. He breathed. He didn't flinch. He flowed. Every attack missed him by a blink of breath, a thread of air. And with each dodge, the fighter grew more wild, more unhinged. Desperation wore the mask of aggression. "Come on, hit me," he roared, voice cracking. "Show me something. Anything." Johnny didn't answer. He waited, watched, learned, and then he moved. A jab, sharp, surgical, not to break, just to remind. It found the ribs, slipping between defenses, like a whispered truth. The fighter gasped, not in pain, but confusion. A breath he didn't expect to lose. Then came the second strike. A clean, crisp punch to the jaw, not brutal, but balanced. The kind of strike that didn't shout, but whispered, "I see you." The crowd gasped as if struck themselves. Johnny stepped back. No follow-up, no celebration, only awareness. The fighter staggered, visibly shaken now. Sweat poured down his face. His eyes searched Johnny's, and for the first time they didn't see a character or a celebrity. They saw a man who'd endured fire and returned with silence. The battle wasn't over. It had just begun. The young fighter's breath came harder, now rasping against his throat like wind through a cracked window. His body still moved, but not with confidence, with habit, with panic. Each drop of sweat glistened like guilt trailing down skin that once glowed with arrogance. His jabs grew wide, sloppy, drunk on adrenaline and ego. His footwork faltered, tangled in its own aggression. The rhythm he once flaunted had disintegrated into chaos, not just from exhaustion, but from doubt, from the haunting realization that he wasn't fighting a man, he was facing a mirror. And that mirror, Johnny Depp, moved with the elegance of a memory sharpened by pain. Every step was quiet thunder, every pivot a stanza of poetry written in scars. He didn't need power to overwhelm. He wielded time, patience, presence. His body whispered the secrets of battles, fought in silence, of wars survived without medals. The young fighter spun wildly into a kick, a spectacle made for applause. But Johnny had already stepped through it. He moved in close, sudden, and sure, and with a precision that shamed violence, delivered a single elbow to the shoulder-sharp, intimate final. The sound wasn't loud, but it landed in the crowd's gut like a sermon. The young man stumbled, and for the first time silence didn't fill the arena. It devoured it. You could hear everything now. The squeak of shoes on canvas, the hiss of breath, the heartbeat behind the spotlight. Thousands of phones held high, trembling in hands too stunned to tap record. The sound of being humbled. Johnny stood still, hands open, calm. His eyes never left the fighter, not to threaten, not to mock, but to witness. The fighter blinked fast. The smirk he had weaponized was now missing, gone like steam. What remained was something raw, something rarely seen in cages like these. Uncertainty. He looked around, maybe for support, maybe for a camera to reclaim his stage. But the audience no longer belonged to him. Their gaze had shifted. Their chants had morphed. His name had vanished into the shadows. In its place came a whisper, then a chant. Johnny, 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 soft at first, then louder, stronger. A name that rose like an anthem from the ashes of bravado, and something inside the fighter snapped. He roared, not like a warrior, but like a wounded animal. Rage flared where dignity had once stood. He lunged with a final scream, fists hammering the air, all finesse abandoned. His punches came wild, sloppy, wide arcs meant to wound. But Johnny, he didn't resist. He absorbed the chaos like the eye of a hurricane. Then he moved. One clean step, a pivot, one perfect punch. A right hook that wasn't violent, it was verdict. Crack. The sound rang out, not loud, not gory, but surgical. The fighter froze mid-swing, mid-sentence, mid-delusion. Then his knees buckled, and he dropped, not just to the mat, but to the truth. The kind of fall where the soul seems to leave before the body lands, where time fractures, where illusions die. And Johnny, he didn't even lift his arms. He just stood, still, watching, not with pride, not with malice, but with clarity. A silence spread across the cage, so pure it felt holy. Cameras clicked, but mouths didn't move. The crowd didn't know how to respond. Not yet. They were still digesting the revelation. Johnny Depp hadn't come to entertain. He'd come to remind. And then eruption. The stadium detonated with roars that broke sound barriers. Feet pounded the bleachers. Hands slapped steel rails. The air exploded with noise. Johnny, Johnny, Johnny. But Johnny didn't turn. He didn't smile. He didn't perform. He walked, one step at a time, toward the cage door, toward the silence that had always been his armor. A storm had passed, but the world didn't feel calmer. It felt changed. The cage door creaked open, and through it walked not a man, but a legend in the making. Johnny Depp moved like silk unraveling from the edge of the night. His boots kissed the canvas in a rhythm only silence could hear. The crowd behind him thundered, but he carried none of it with him. The noise didn't chase him, it bowed to him. Security guards stepped aside with unconscious reverence, as if their bodies recognized truth before their minds could name it. Stagehands and fighters alike watched him pass, not with awe, but with stillness, as if he were a relic from some forgotten age of meaning. Their lips parted, but no words came. They simply watched. He didn't glance left or right. His eyes were on a place no one else could see. Behind him, the cage remained frozen in aftermath. The young fighter lay groaning, face bruised, soul battered. But worse than pain was the echo, not of fists, but of silence, of the silence that had drowned out his entire act, of the gaze that didn't blink, didn't cheer, didn't flinch, and yet broke him entirely. He rolled onto his side, the world above him spinning. Bright white lights stabbed at his vision, making halos out of every bulb. His lungs worked like machines, trying to remember how to breathe. A medic crouched beside him. "Stay with us," she said gently. "Can you hear me?" He nodded, though his mind wasn't with her. His eyes searched, desperate for one final glimpse. And there, just before Johnny disappeared behind the velvet curtain, he caught it. A silhouette. No victory pose. No self-congratulation. Just a man fading into shadow. And that was the worst pain of all, because he realized then, the humiliation wasn't in the fall. It wasn't in the punch. It was in the absence. No speech, no retaliation, no soundbite, just departure. The kind that rewrites your story without saying a word. Above, the arena had become an echo chamber of disbelief. Thousands still stood with phones held high, watching footage they had just lived through. Some eyes were wet, others wide. No one looked away. This hadn't been a fight. It had been a reminder of restraint, of grace, of mastery. The young fighter now sat on a small stool in his corner, shoulders hunched, towel draped over his neck like the cloak of a fallen king. His mouth worked at words he didn't have. The lights, once his stage, now exposed him. He was alone, and he knew it. His hands gripped the stool. He blinked slowly, not from injury, but from impact, the internal kind. The kind that doesn't bruise skin, but character. A lesson whispered itself across his consciousness like a fog through broken glass. There are men who fight to be remembered, and men who are remembered because they didn't need to fight. Backstage, the air had changed. Even without Johnny in sight, his presence hung in the hall like a spirit. The ground still carried the weight of what had occurred. People moved differently now, slower, softer. Then from the dark tunnel, Johnny emerged once more, not for a spotlight, but to leave. He walked with the ease of someone who owed the world nothing. No expression on his face, no rush in his pace, just a gentle brush of fabric, a hand grazing the wall beside him, like he was tuning back into the world from a different frequency. A camera crew froze mid-frame. The journalist, mic in hand, stepped forward, then stopped herself. The question on her lips withered in the gravity of his silence. Johnny adjusted the edge of his coat. His silver ring flashed beneath the floodlights. One last time. He paused beside a stagehand, and in a voice low as a prayer said only, "Let them remember what it means to listen." And then he vanished. No exit music, no after party, no statement, only the howl of a digital storm rising behind him. Social media caught fire. Clips of the final punch looped like prophecy fulfilled. Fans stitched together reels of the stare that dodged the silence. Hashtags exploded. Hashtag Deb doesn't he miss. Hashtag silence speaks. Hashtag the man who didn't he need words. One tweet went viral in seconds. He didn't fight like a movie star. He fought like a man who's already been to hell, and walked out quietly. Back inside the locker room, the young fighter sat before a mirror, his reflection blurred, not by blood, but by realization. His hands trembled slightly as he pressed an ice pack to his cheek. But it wasn't the pain that shook him. It was that he'd met someone who didn't need to destroy him to defeat him. His coach stood behind him in the mirror. He hadn't spoken the whole time, until now. "Tough night," he murmured. "But remember this, you didn't lose to a fighter. You met a truth." The fighter stared at himself, not broken, but no longer certain of who he'd been. Outside, the chants had stopped, but Johnny's name still lingered like dust caught in cathedral light. No longer shouted, now whispered, and those whispers would last forever. The arena, once an electric storm of noise and movement, now felt like the aftermath of something sacred. The crowd slowly thinned, murmurs lingering like fog clinging to the ground after a tempest. The mat inside the cage still bore the outlines of the night's sweat-blood footprints. But the fight was over. The spectacle had ended, and yet something still pulsed in the air. Not energy, not adrenaline, but reverence. The young fighter sat hunched in the corner, shoulders sagging beneath the weight of realization. He wasn't injured beyond repair, but something deeper had broken, something no MRI could capture. His ego, once inflated like a hot air balloon, now lay in shreds around him. No cameras were pointed at him now. No chance called his name. Only silence. A silence he used to mistake for weakness. Now it roared louder than applause. His coach stood beside him, arms crossed, expression unreadable. After long minutes, he finally said, "You ever heard of a quiet storm?" The fighter didn't answer. The coach continued, "It's not the one that rattles windows or howls through trees. It's the one that changes the landscape without a sound." The young man nodded barely, his eyes still puffy, and Red glanced toward the exit where Johnny had vanished. He didn't hate him. He didn't envy him. He didn't even fear him. He respected him in a way he had never respected anyone before. Meanwhile, backstage, the crew had already begun striking down the set. Lights dimmed, wires coiled, security earpieces buzzed quietly with updates. But Johnny Depp, nowhere to be found. He had exited the building the way he lived that moment, silently, purposefully, as if slipping between the seams of reality. Out front, however, the legend was just beginning. Clips flooded TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter. Frame-by-frame breakdowns of Johnny's footwork, side-by-side comparisons with martial arts masters. Fan edits paired him with orchestral music, slow-motion, storm sound effects. But even the flashiest edit couldn't replicate what made the moment immortal. His stillness. That's what they kept replaying. The look, the breath, the silence, the decision to walk away. News outlets struggled to describe it. Pundits debated it. Psychologists broke it down. Commentators went viral trying to decode it. It wasn't about the punch, one said on a late-night panel. It was about the way he chose not to gloat. He didn't win with his fists, another added. He won with his restraint, his control. He didn't fight for dominance, a psychologist chimed in. He fought like a man who has nothing left to prove. In homes across the country, viewers who had tuned in for a fight found themselves replaying the final 2 minutes again and again, not for blood, not for glory, but for truth. In the days that followed, the young fighter issued a statement. It wasn't long, no PR polish, just a video shot on a cracked phone. He sat in his gym, bandages visible on his brow, but his voice steady. "I've fought men with muscles bigger than my whole body," he said, "but I've never fought silence before. I've never met someone who made me realize I've been loud my whole life because I was terrified of listening. Johnny didn't knock me out. He woke me up. Thank you." It went viral, not because of the apology, but because it came from a man people thought couldn't be humbled. Back in Los Angeles, Johnny Depp sat alone in a jazz bar no one had ever heard of. The lights were low, the stage empty. A glass of red wine rested in his hand like a secret. He wasn't recognized, or if he was, no one dared approach him. He wasn't seeking attention. He had already said everything he needed to say without speaking a word. The bartender slid a napkin toward him, folded like a note. Written in black ink were 5 words: "You changed something in me." He didn't look around. He didn't ask who sent it. He just folded the napkin again, tucked it into his coat, and took a sip. The jazz started moments later, a slow blue melody. It didn't match the night's events, but maybe that was the point. Johnny watched the notes drift through the air like ghosts, because he understood what most never will, that sometimes the greatest act of strength is not to strike, it's to stand still and be seen, to walk through fire and say nothing because you no longer need to. That night the fighter fell, but a man rose, and Johnny, he never fought again because he didn't need to.